Last week by Michael, the section of chapters 13 through 15, which give the primary events that happened during the reign of King Saul. Chapter 13 recorded for us the beginning of his downfall, where the Philistines, who at this time had been oppressing the nation of Israel, and on some of the western cities or towns, the Philistines had been collecting tribute. They had enslaved a portion of the Israelite population, and Saul has risen up to combat that and has had some success. At this point, the Philistines, in response to the success, it was actually Jonathan's success, Saul's son, but Saul takes credit for that. Regardless of who did it, the Philistines respond with a major show of force, and they come at the nation of Israel. And as they do, Samuel the prophet tells Saul, go and wait 1 week. Wait for 7 days, and on the 7th day I'll arrive. We'll make the offering. We'll hear from God. We'll go take care of these Philistines. And as Saul is waiting, the Philistines are gathering together, and the Israelites are freaking out. And they're bailing out on Saul. Right? They're hiding, it says here in chapter 13, verse 6, when the men of Israel saw that they were in trouble, for the people were hard pressed, they hid themselves in caves and in holes and in rocks and in the tombs and in cisterns. And some of the Hebrews crossed the fords of the Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. So they're in a panic and they're hiding. I mean, these guys are shaking in their boots. And Saul's response is not to wait until Samuel arrives. He waits until the 7th day, as Samuel had directed. He doesn't see Samuel in the time that he believes Samuel should have shown. And so in verse 9 of chapter 13, we read Saul saying, so Saul said, bring the burnt offering here to me and the peace offerings. And he offered the burnt offering. And verse 10, and as soon as he had finished offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came. So it was as if God is testing Saul. How are you going to act? Are you going to act as a man of faith, or are you going to act as a man of the world? See, a man of the world would have done exactly what Saul did. He would have taken action. This is happening, that's happening, that's happening. I'm a man of action. I'm going to take action. I'm going to stop these guys from leaving by beginning our attack on the Philistines. Because if I don't, before you know it, it's going to be me, Jonathan, and our armor bearers, and that's it. Everybody's going to be gone. There's going to be no army here. We will see that contrasted tonight in chapter 14 with the famous words of Jonathan in chapter 14, verse 6. We hear Jonathan, come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us. And here it is. For nothing can hinder the Lord from saving by many or by few. Saul's son gets it. Unfortunately, due to Saul's actions, Saul's son will never have an opportunity to reign as king. God has told Saul at this point, your kingdom will not continue. You are the first and the last of your line to reign as king over Israel. But Jonathan, he gets it. He understands. He has a greater concept of God and what's possible. There are other comparisons of the two where Saul's unfaithfulness is contrasted by Jonathan's faithfulness, and then at the end of this, so chapter 14 is like it's sandwiched between chapter 13, which shows the disaster of Saul, and chapter 15, which shows additional disasters, of Saul. But in the middle of that, we have the great victory and the courage and the faith of Jonathan. And don't be mistaken, it's not by chance. The writer put these things side by side like that specifically for us to see and compare. So without further introduction, can I get a volunteer to read 1 Samuel chapter 14, verses 1 through 5?
Yeah, I'll do it.
Thanks, Mike.
Now it happened one day that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who bore his armor, "Come, let us go over to the Philistines' garrison that's on the other side." But he did not tell his father. And Saul was sitting in the outskirts of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree, which is in Migron. The people who were with him were about 600 men. Ahijah, the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh, was wearing an ephod. But the people did not know that Jonathan had gone. Between the passes by which Jonathan sought to go over to the Philistine garrison, there was a sharp rock on one side and a sharp rock on the other side. And the name of one was Bozez, and the name of the other, Sina. The front of one faced northward opposite Michmash, and the other southward opposite Gibeah.
Thanks, Mike. So one day, Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who carried his armor, "Come, let us go over to the Philistine garrison on the other side." But he did not tell his father. So really, the term that's translated one day would probably be better that day rather than one day, because it is responding to Saul and his cowardice and the people's cowardice leaving as the Philistines are surmounting their armies. And so Jonathan's response is a response of courage. Let's go. Let's gather up a couple 100,000 men and go. No, you and me. Let's go. You and I. Let's go see what the Lord will do. And his armor bearer, as we're going to read further down, is also a man of faith, because he goes with him. He could have said, "You're on your own, homeboy. You're crazy." He is crazy, but he's crazy with faith. So this garrison on the other side it's like a fort Like in the United States, we have at various, I don't know, 150 years ago, we had various forts throughout the United States where we had military planted within our country to help control population and to ensure the safety of the communities. Well, this is similar to that, except for it is an opposing government's garrison. It's their fort within Israel. So they have set up a town within a town, in one respect, of their army people within Israel to control the people around, to make sure they're doing what the Philistines want them to do, that they're paying tribute, and that they're not preparing themselves for battle. It was last week that we read that there was no blacksmith found in all the land of Israel. So at this time, we are at the tail end of the Bronze Age and at the beginning of the Iron Age, and the Philistines obviously had figured out Iron Age technology. Israel hadn't at this point, and the Philistines were not going to allow them to. It wouldn't be that hard to look over somebody's shoulder and say, I could probably begin to do that stuff now, right? But the Philistines said, no, you're not doing this, and we're going to make sure you don't, and we're going to post garrisons at various places, and we're going to, inspect. We expect you to obey, and we're going to inspect what you're doing to ensure that you obey. And they would not allow them a blacksmith. Therefore, the Israelites had farm implements for weapons. Now, a sickle against a sword, it's not quite the same as a gun against a knife, but you certainly are the underdog. So they have a garrison there, and to stir things up and get this thing moving, Jonathan makes a move. At the end of verse 1, it says, but he did not tell his father. So this is the first time, I believe, in the narrative that we learn that Jonathan is the son of Saul. And then it goes on, Saul was staying in the outskirts of Gibeah in the pomegranate cave at Migron. There's some difficulties in the text. He may have been in a cave, he may have been under a tree. The point of that being, he wasn't attending to the battle per se, or the upcoming battle. He was performing administrative duty. Not being a Hebrew scholar, I don't have it well enough to give you all the specific details of it. But the way this is written, it's showing that Saul is there acting as a judge. He is weighing things, people are bringing things to him, and he's weighing these things out for them. While Jonathan, and this isn't a time where the other guys their armies are gathering, right? And he's over here weighing out cases of, you owe this guy $20 for that sheep that your dog killed. While that stuff is important, this may not have been the time for that. Saul tends to do that. One commentator that I read wrote this, and I found this to be very profound, and this is one of the takeaways for us tonight. He wrote, Saul is found praying when he should be taking action, and he's found taking action when he should be praying. There are times to pray, and there are times to take action. We need to have the spiritual maturity to know when to do which. Because Saul certainly participates in religious activity. And we're going to read about that as we go through this. It just doesn't match up with what he's doing. So, middle of verse 2. The people who were with him were about 600. So he has dropped down from about 3,000 to about 600, including Ahijah, the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the priest of the Lord in Shiloh, wearing an ephod. Okay, so who is Ahijah? Or let me rephrase this. This may strike it better to you. Who is Ichabod? I don't know if some of you were here when we studied that portion. When the ark was captured, Eli's son, Phinehas, his wife was in labor, and she gave birth to a boy. And when she heard that the ark had been captured by the Philistines, she named her boy Ichabod, saying, "The glory of the Lord has departed." So Ahijah is of the line of Eli. Eli is the rejected priest. Remember, God started Samuel's ministry by giving him a word to speak to Eli, saying, "You have not done what is right. Bad things are going to happen to your family. You're going to know it because both of your sons are going to die in one day. And the day the ark is captured is the day both sons die. And ultimately, that's the same day that Eli dies." So Saul is no longer hearing from Samuel. After his rejection of the word of God, Samuel left him. Saul does not pursue him. Instead, he goes and gets Ahijah, that is part of this rejected priest line. Don't think that these details are in here by chance. We're seeing a rejected king now in party with the rejected priest's family. And he is wearing an ephod. Now the ephod is part of the priestly garment, and it's going to have a pocket in it which are going to contain the Urim and Thummim, which are lights in perfection. And one is the curse and one is the blessing. I believe the Urim is the curse. Am I right? One is a curse, one is black and one is white. One is a curse and one is a blessing, depending on what question they're asking. There are these two rocks. It's believed. We don't have much detail on these, okay? But what is believed to be is that they would ask the Lord a question, the priest would reach into his ephod and he would pull out one of the two smooth stones. Depending upon which one he pulled out would be the answer that God had given them. The Lord would lead the priest to pull out the right one. So Ahijah is wearing an ephod. Rather than hearing from Samuel, who was God's man, see, the prophet, the office of the prophet of the nation, was to be the man in the ear of the king. And remember when Samuel stepped down in office, how he called down rain? He said, so that you, to paraphrase, so that you know what I'm saying is true, and so that you know that God still speaks through the prophet even though he has a king. It's going to rain today. Yeah, and it hasn't rained for months, and it's not due to rain for months because we're in the middle of harvest season, and that day it rained. And that showed the nation, those people that were there, that God's power still resided not with the king, but with the prophet. The prophet was the one who was to speak to the king and lead the country. But Saul now has gone his own way, and he's got his own priest. And he's refusing now to work with Samuel, as Samuel has rejected Saul through the kingship, but he's still praying for him. So, verse 4. Within the passes which Jonathan sought to go over to the Philistine, there was a rocky crag on one side and a rocky crag on the other side. The name of one was Bozez, and then the name of the other was Sina. The one crag rose to the north side of Michmash, and to the other in south, on the south, in front of Geba. One of these, and I don't recall which one, the name reflects like a miry swamp, and the other reflects thorns and thistles. The point of that is this is an impassable area. You don't just run across this, okay? There are two cliffs, and they were given these names because they are very difficult to get through. Yet, this is the path that Jonathan will take to victory. Can I get a volunteer to read verses 6 through 15, please?
I'll read.
Thank you.
And Jonathan said to the young man that bare his armor, Come, let us go over unto these garrisons of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for there is no restraint to the Lord to save by many or by few. And his armor-bearer said unto him, Do all that is in thine heart. Turn thee, behold, I am with thee, according to thy heart. Then said Jonathan, Behold, we will pass over unto these men, and we will discover ourselves unto them. And if they say thus unto us, Tarry until we come to you, then we will stand still in our place, and will not go up unto them. But if they say thus, Come up unto us, then we will go up, for the Lord hath delivered them into our hand, and thus shall be a sign unto us. And both of them discovered themselves unto the garrison of the Philistines. And the Philistines said, Behold, the Hebrews come forth out of the holes where they have hid themselves. And the men of the garrison answered Jonathan and his armor-bearer, and said, Come up to us, and we will show you a thing. And Jonathan said to his armor-bearer, Come up after me, for the Lord hath delivered them into the hand of Israel. And Jonathan climbed up upon his hands and upon his feet, and his armor-bearer after him. And they fell before Jonathan, and his armor-bearer slew after him. And that first slaughter which Jonathan and his armor-bearer made was about 20 men, within, as it were, in half an acre of land, which a yoke of oxen might plow. And there was trembling in the host in the field among all the people. The garrison and the spoilers, they also trembled, and the earth quaked, so it was a very great trembling. And the watchmen of Saul and Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude melted away, and they went on beating down one another. To 17 or 18?
No, you're good right there. Thank you. So Jonathan says to the young man who carried his armor, Come, let us go over to the garrison of these uncircumcised. That, in this form, is a term of derision. He's making a slur against the Philistines. It may be that the Lord will work for us. And again, here are those famous words of faith. For nothing can hinder the Lord from saving by many or by few. Remember when the story is told when Jesus is in the garden and they come to arrest him, and there is a significant amount of soldiers. And Peter begins to fight, and Jesus stopped. With a word, I can call down legions of angels. With a word, God can do anything at any time. We don't necessarily see that. Therefore, we shake in our boots when these things happen. It's a natural response of fear in these times. But to stay in fear is not God's place for us. His place for us is to feel that fear and walk through it in faith. Like John, you don't think Jonathan was scared? I'm certain that he was. But he didn't allow that fear to overcome him. That's what gets your adrenaline up in the conflict, that fear, and he faces that and he goes through it. And his armor bearer then, in verse 7 says, and his armor bearer said to him, do all that is in your heart, do as you wish. In other words, I'm with you. However this thing works out, it's you and me. Then Jonathan said, behold, and here's the plan. We will cross over to the men, and we will show ourselves to them. And now, in a sense, this is reminiscent of Gideon and his fleece, right? He's saying, if this happens, we're going to know that the Lord is with us. Notice, though, that Jonathan doesn't say we're not going to fight. He just says whether we're going to go up and attack or we're going to wait for them to come down. Jonathan is bound to determine to do something. But God is not obligated. Just because we step out in faith, that does not obligate God to follow us into whatever endeavor we are headed into. Jonathan knows that. If it's God's will, then by all means. But just because we step out and go to do something, by faith, I'm going to walk across that freeway when there's cars coming by at 70 miles an hour. By faith, the first car that comes by is going to kill you. Okay? Sorry. Right? God didn't lead you there. Stupidity did. Right? So be careful with that, because there are those who would say, you can overcome anything. There are those who would take verses like, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. They'll pull that out of context and say it means whatever you need it to mean at the moment. Read it in context. Paul was talking about living whether he had a lot or whether he was poor and had nothing but need. I can do all things. I can live in any situation. I'm going to be okay. I got Jesus. That's what I really need. The rest of it's peripheral. That's what he was saying. Not I can walk out on the freeway and dodge cars at 70 miles an hour.
Catch bullets with my teeth.
Yeah, there you go. So they're going to cross over. Verse 9, if they say to us, wait until we come to you, then we will stand in our place, and we will not go up to them. But if they say, come up to us, then we will go up, for the Lord has given them into our hand, and this shall be a sign to us. So he's laid out his, quote, fleece. So the both of them showed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines. And the Philistines said, look, I'm not sure how well I can do this in a mocking tone, but read this in a mocking tone. Look, the Hebrews are coming out of their holes where they have hidden themselves. Right? Because they did. They hid in holes and caves. It said that they hid in tombs. What are in tombs?
Dead bones.
Eh,
Defiled.
yeah. If these guys are willing to hide in a tomb, they're scared. So, look, the Hebrews are coming out of their holes where they have hidden themselves. And the men of the garrison hailed Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, come up to us. We'll show you a thing. He's probably, doing the high five with his buddy here. Jonathan said to his armor bearer, come up after me, for the Lord has given them into the hand of Israel. Notice in the language there, even right here, Jonathan's not about Jonathan. He's about the Lord and the nation of Israel, right? Not the Lord has given him to me. I'm going to do this great thing. The Lord has given him to him. He is going to do a great thing. But that's not where Jonathan's focus is. His focus is on God and the nation. Verse 13, then Jonathan climbed up on his hands and feet, and his armor bearer after him. Remember, I said these things are like nigh impassable. And they fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer killed them after him. So they're going, Jonathan's in the lead, and they're fighting like crazy. And that first strike which Jonathan and his armor bearer made killed about 20 men within, as it were, a half a furlong's length in an acre of land. So within a period, the language here, it's not really clear whether they're talking about how much area there was or the amount of time it took them to do it. The point of it is, Jonathan stepped out in faith, and 2 men with 1 sword killed 20 men. And that starts the victory, and as they say, it's all downhill from there.
Excuse me,
Yes, sir.
does it reference anywhere if Saul was able to see this happen?
They are. We're almost there.
Okay.
Yeah. At that first strike, so and there was panic in the camp, in the field, and among all the people. The garrison, even the raiders, trembled. The earth quaked, and it became a very great panic. So God now has sent a panic among the Philistines and an earthquake at the same time. Verse 16. Now here's to answer your question. Would you go ahead and read 16 through 23 for us, Dan?
Sure. When Saul's watchmen in Gibeah of Benjamin looked, they saw the panicking troops scattering in every direction. So Saul said to the troops with him, "Call the roll and determine who has left us." They called the roll and saw that Jonathan and his armor bearer were gone. Saul told Ahijah, "Bring the ark of God, for it is with the Israelites at that time." While Saul spoke to the priest, the panic in the Philistine camp increased in intensity. So Saul said to the priest, "Stop what you are doing." Where do you want me to go to?
23?
All right. So verse 20 is, Saul and all his troops with him assembled and marched to the battle, and there the Philistines were fighting against each other in great confusion. There were Hebrews from the area who had gone earlier into the camp to join the Philistines, but even they joined the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. When all the Israelite men who had been hiding in the hills country of Ephraim heard that the Philistines were fleeing, they also joined Saul and Jonathan in the battle. So the Lord saved Israel that day.
And then mine continues, and the battle pressed on beyond Beth Aven. So the watchmen of Saul in Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude was dispersing here and there. So they are about 2 to 3 miles away, and this is area with various hills, and if they are watchmen, they're on a high hill in the area, and they are able to see, they may not be able to see who's doing what, but they can see that there is a great commotion going on over there, and that the people are dispersing. Then Saul said to the people, verse 17, who were with him, "Count and see who's gone from us, because you know something's going on." And when they had counted, behold, Jonathan and his armor bearer were not there. So here, let me continue. So Saul said to Ahijah, "Bring the ark of God here." For the ark of God was at that time with the people of Israel. So there are difficulties with the text of 1 Samuel, and I know I probably said this a dozen times, but the Masoretic text, which most of our Bibles translates the Hebrew from, is in pretty bad shape. So a good portion of the text gets filled in from the Septuagint. And they're not sure that that belongs there, that the Ark of God was there. What fits here is that he's calling Ahijah, who's wearing the ephod, to inquire of God. That's the point of it. So whether the ark was there or not really isn't significant, right? Because they said that it had taken it to Kiriath Jearim and it remained there for 20 years. That doesn't mean it remained there continually and they didn't bring it out for battle. That may well have been the case, but it may not have been. They don't need the ark to inquire. But what this also shows is Saul says,
bring the ark here so we can inquire of God. If in fact that's what he said, or bring the ephod. Guess what? You don't bring God to you. You don't bring his presence to you. You go to him. But you can see his attitude here, right? And just remember, not that long ago, this was the humble guy who said, who, me? To Samuel. I'm gonna be the king? And he was hiding from the people because he was afraid. Well, he's gotten over that. Completely gotten over that. Verse 19, now while Saul was talking to the priest, the tumult in the camp of the Philistines increased more and more. So Saul said to the priest, withdraw your hand. That would indicate that he was in the ephod to retrieve one of the stones to make a decision. What should we do here? Again, now Saul has no time for that. Withdraw your hand. I'm done waiting, right? You're taking too long for this. I don't need you to pray about it before you do it. Just, you should have already done it. We're moving. That's our guy. Verse 20. Then Saul and all the people who were with him rallied and went into the battle. And behold, every Philistine sword was against his fellow, and there was great confusion. Now the Hebrews who had been with the Philistines before that time, and who had gone up with them into the camp, even they also turned to be with the Israelites who were with Saul and Jonathan. So in the Philistine camp, there are Israelites. They had men there who, whether they were there as slaves or whether they were mercenaries against their own people, we don't know. What we do know is, at this point, they're with Israel. And they're in the camp, so they got an upper hand. And back here where it said, every man's sword was against his fellow, a more accurate rendering of that would be, every man was stabbing his fellow. They were going at each other, the Philistines were, out of complete panic. That's not a natural concept. It's natural to panic in battle. It's not natural in battle for everyone to panic and kill each other. But that's what takes place. So we read that. Verse 22, likewise, when all the men of Israel who had hidden themselves in the hill country of Ephraim heard that the Philistines were fleeing, they too followed hard after them. So the guys that were hiding, they pop up out of their holes, right? And now they're chasing. Verse 23. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle pressed beyond Beth-aven. The names of some of these places are very significant. Remember earlier we looked at the word Bethlehem. And we remember Beth it meant house, and Lechem is bread. So that was a house of bread. And it was kind of ironic that Ruth and her husband, Naomi and her husband left Bethlehem because there was no bread, right? Bethel is house of God. Beth-aven is house of iniquity. Interesting. I thought, I don't know how relevant that is to our text. I just found that interesting in my reading. And so we'll finish up we have two more paragraphs. So if I get someone to read 24 through 30. We have 3 more paragraphs. 24 through 30, that next paragraph.
I'll read, but my version is a lot different from what you guys have been reading.
All right, what do you got?
I'm not sure because I have it on my phone, so.
Okay, well, let's give it a shot.
Okay. So 24 through 30.
Yes.
And all the people were with Saul, about 20,000 men, and the fight was general through all the hill country of Ephraim. But Saul made a great error that day by putting the people under an oath, saying, let that man be cursed who takes food before evening comes. and I have given punishment to those who are against me. So the people had not a taste of food. And there was honey on the face of the field, and all the people came to the honey, the bees having gone from it. But not a man put his hand to his mouth for fear of the curse. But Jonathan, having no knowledge of the oath his father had put on the people, stretching out the rod which was in his hand, put the end of it in the honey and put it to his mouth, then his eyes were made bright. Then one of the people said to him, your father put the people under an oath, saying, let that man be cursed who takes any food this day. And the people were feeble, needing food. Then Jonathan said, my father has made trouble come on the land. Now see how bright my eyes have become, because I have taken a little of this honey. How much more if the people had freely taken their food from the goods of those who were fighting against them? Would there not have been much greater destruction among the Philistines?
Thank you.
Close enough?
That was awesome. Yeah.
So-
Like in your face, Dad.
Again, we see a contrast of the two characters here. This is, what do I need to do with that? So, verse 24, and the men of Israel had been hard pressed that day. So Saul laid an oath on the people, saying, cursed be the man who eats food until it is evening, and I am avenged on my enemies. So none of the people tasted food. So he puts the people under this curse, or this oath, and we're left to determine why. The writer doesn't tell us. You know, knowing his character, he does things that are religious at times. This may be some type of a fast for the day. Again, that would show some pretty bad timing at the time when you need to be eating and drinking and fighting and keeping your energy up. Anybody who's done any type of athletics would be well aware of that, right? If you do not, you hit what they call hitting the wall, and you're done. And that's what happens to these guys, right? So he puts this oath out. So as we're building the setting, and then we'll see the scene itself later in the next paragraph. So the setting is Saul has made this vow, verse 25, now that all the people came to the forest, behold, the honey was on the ground. And when the people entered the forest, behold, the honey was dropping, but no one put his hand to his mouth, for the people feared God. But Jonathan had not heard his father charge the people with the oath. Did I misread that?
No.
I did misread that. They didn't fear God at this point. They feared the oath. He made a stupid oath. They feared the king and his stupidity. This guy's doing some crazy stuff, right? And there's not a reverence for God. It's a reverence for this maniac king that we've got. So Jonathan, however, didn't hear this because he was off fighting. Remember, he was out with his buddy, and they're climbing up these rocky crags and starting to fight with the Philistines. So he didn't hear this whole craziness. They weren't together at the time. So, verse 27, but Jonathan, we covered that. So, from the middle of the verse, so he put out the tip of his staff that was in his hand, and he dipped it in the honeycomb, and he put forth his hand to his mouth, and his eyes became bright. A little bit of sugar at the right time. Right? When I used to be a bicycle racer, I'd carry these gel packs in my like right underneath my pant leg, and so that would keep them warm. And you just rip them open, and you could squirt the whole thing in your mouth, a little bit of water, and you've got a mixture. They were a mixture of complex and simple carbohydrates to keep you going. That's exactly what is needed in this time. And Jonathan's smart enough to do that, but his dad apparently wasn't. Then one of the people said, your father strictly charged the people with an oath, saying, cursed be the man who eats food this day.
and the people were faint. So on the one hand, here's this oath, and then here's on the other hand, here's all these people that need something to eat. Then Jonathan said, my father has troubled the land. See how my eyes have become bright because I tasted a little of this honey? Jonathan can see it clearly. His father's ability to lead has vanished. He's making stupid decisions that are now not only affecting him and his family going forward in the kingdom, but his decisions are going to affect the whole nation. It's going to affect the way this battle turns out. So instead of wiping these Philistines out, a great number of them are going to escape, which means they're going to come back at a later date and kill more Israelites. Verse 30, how much better if the people had eaten freely today of the spoil of their enemies that they found? For now the defeat among the Philistines has not been great. So he just summarizes the situation there. I'm going to go ahead and read the next section myself. Verse 31. They struck down the Philistines that day from Michmash to Aijalon, and the people were very faint. And I'm reading from the English Standard Version. The people pounced on the spoil and took sheep and oxen and calves and slaughtered them on the ground. The people ate them with the blood. They told Saul, behold, the people are sinning against the Lord by eating with the blood. And he said, you have dealt treacherously. Roll a great stone to me here. And Saul said, disperse yourselves among the people and say to them, let every man bring his ox or his sheep and slaughter them here and eat. And do not sin against the Lord by eating with the blood. So every one of the people brought his ox with him that night, and they slaughtered them there. And Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first altar that he had built to the Lord. So the people are famished. In fact, it says here that they were very faint. They pounced on the spoil, and they began slaughtering these animals. And the normal process, if there wasn't a tree nearby, would be to put them up on top of a rock, slaughter them so that the blood could drain out. Right? They have to be able to elevate the animal somewhat off of the ground. At this point, these people are so hungry, they don't care. It doesn't say so in the text. I wouldn't doubt it a minute if these guys are eating raw meat at this point. I mean, they haven't eaten all day, right? And they're like, hey, sushi, I'm in, right? You ever been to a sushi bar? I've been to a sushi bar. Come on, let's eat, right? They're not draining the blood, and God was very, very specific about that. Now, look, Saul, yeah, he doesn't get it, right? He's going to stop him from this. He sees the importance of not eating the blood, and in this sense, he's wrong. What is more important? Keeping a niche of the law, or the people dying from lack of food? Not that they're dying, okay? But there are times when one law outweighs another. And those times are when somebody's life is at stake. Look at David. David will take the bread of the presence from the priest because these guys haven't eaten in a while. They got nothing to eat. The law of the well-being of the man himself outweighs the ceremonial law. I'm not saying that this law to drain the blood was not important. It was critically important. But Saul, again, he takes action at the wrong time. Had he let the people eat to begin with, there wouldn't have been such a panic to get the food. Say, hey, I'm not waiting a half an hour for this blood to drain out of this beast. You know? But he stops it, roll a stone over here, and so they would place the animal on the dead animal up on the stone and bleed it there. And then there's this comment at the end of the paragraph. And Saul built an altar to the Lord. It was the first altar he built to the Lord. And in context, I believe that was a criticism. That out of all the things that have taken place, he's finally building an altar. This was his first time. When should he have first done it? Right? When God anointed, when Samuel met him, when he was out looking for the donkeys and anointed king, and then confirmed it in front of all the people, Saul should have built an altar then. It was not his pattern. Now he's trying to make up for it. Good that he did it, bad that it was his first one. And we've got 2 more paragraphs, and we'll be out. So we're doing good on time. A volunteer, please, for verses 36 through 42.
Now Saul said, "Let us go down after the Philistines by night and plunder them until the morning light, and let us not leave a man of them." And they said, "Do whatever seems good to you." Then the priest said, "Let us draw near to God here." So Saul asked counsel of God, "Shall I go down after the Philistines? Will you deliver them into the hand of Israel?" But he did not answer him that day. And Saul said, "Come over here, all you chiefs of the people, and know and see what this sin was today. For as the Lord lives, who saves Israel, though it be in Jonathan my son, he shall surely die." But not a man among all the people answered him. How far am I going, Bob?
Through 42.
Okay. Verse 40. Then he said to all Israel, "You be on one side, and my son Jonathan and I will be on the other side." And the people said to Saul, "Do what seems good to you." Therefore Saul said to the Lord God of Israel, "Give a perfect lot." So Saul and Jonathan were taken, but the people escaped. And Saul said, "Cast lots between my son Jonathan and me." So Jonathan was taken.
Thank you. So verse 36, then Saul says, "Let us go down to the Philistines by night and plunder them until the morning light. Let us not leave a man of them." And they said, "Do whatever seems good to you." So the people had fought all day. They've been famished. They've had a little bit to eat at this point. Saul said, "That's enough. We need to get back into the battle before these guys are gone home. Let's go." But and the people, they're not going to argue with the king. I mean, you could hear it in their voice. Do whatever seems right for you, to you. Their response is the correct response. I'm just not sure of the tone of it. I can imagine them saying, "Really? After you kept us from food all day, we've had an hour worth of time to rest and eat, you want to go again? If you'd have planned this thing out right, they'd be all dead now. Do whatever seems best to you, guy. Whatever seems best to you." But the priest, even Ahijah now, right? Ahijah, although he's of the rejected family line, he's not a bad guy. Okay, he just comes from a line. So when I was pointing that out, I wasn't trying to say anything against Ahijah. Other than the fact that the writer is showing clearly that Saul has moved away from getting his advice from Samuel where he's supposed to, and he's gone to the priestly line, and that this priestly line had been previously rejected by the Lord. There is absolutely nothing that we know of Ahijah or his character that is anything bad, to my knowledge at this point. So, Ahijah says, "Let us draw near to God." It actually doesn't say his name here, but the priest, but that's Ahijah. "Let us draw near to God here." And so he fronted Saul off in front of the people, I would assume. So Saul inquires of God, "Shall I go out down after the Philistine? Will you hand them into my
will you give them into the hand of Israel? But he did not answer him that day. So he has the Urim and the Thummim, and it's basically a yes or a no. So my assumption is that he's not giving him a favorable answer. Because it's not whether, there's not, it's a yes or no, right? So he is answering, he has to answer. The guy's gonna pull out one of the two stones. But he's not giving him a favorable answer, would be my assumption. And then most of the commentaries that I read kind of went along that line. So he's not getting any answer, or the answer that he's looking for. And he's wise in that they're sin in the camp. We've seen this, not the exact same circumstance, but there was a similar circumstance with Joshua in the city of Ai. I'm not sure how you pronounce it, Ai, 2 letters, where it's a small town, and so they go, you know, we've got, I don't know, 600,000 warriors. We don't need 600,000 warriors to go kill a town of 30,000 or whatever there were. Let's just choose some elite troops. You guys go wipe them out, and we'll be on to the next place. So they choose some elite troops, and instead of wiping them out, they get their butts handed to them. And when they come back, Moses isn't there at this time, is he? Anyway, whoever's leading the nation, my mind's slipping. It's just the second thing I lost. Can't remember the first. So he falls on his face, the leader of the nation does, before God, and says, why have you done this? And God says, get up, stop your praying. There's sin in the camp. Deal with that first, then come back and pray. And they go through this process of lots, and it comes out that there's a man named Achan, and then when he was in the midst of the battle with a previous town where God said, wipe them out entirely. Men, women, children, and burn everything to the ground. They did, with the exception of, that's some pretty good looking garments right there, right? That's a Nike, that's an Armani. I gotta have that, right? Or whatever. And so he grabs some clothing and some gold or some jewels or something to that effect, and he has it hidden underneath his tent. And he's taken by Lot, and he comes before the high priest, and they tell him, give glory to God, meaning tell the truth. And he goes, well, obviously, you know, lying at this point isn't gonna go my way, so he tells them what happens, and they took him and they stoned him, I believe, and then the ground, is that where the ground opened up and swallowed up this little tent? Or was that another one? But they took care of the issue. There was sin in the camp, and it affected not just the sinner, but others, right? So here's sin in the camp again, but wait a minute, all he did was eat. But he disobeyed the king's order. Whether the order was stupid or not, God's honoring that. Whether this was a stupid oath or not, God is honoring that. So whether or not we obey with all, we agree the speed limit should be 65, we shouldn't be doing 115 miles an hour on the freeway. All right?
Excuse me?
Oh, sorry. Did I say something?
You told me to.
We're on camera. Carol has that little AMG Mercedes the other day, and I told her, get up a little bit. Let's, you know, at 115, I told her, shut it down. You know.
He wanted me to go 120.
Woo! Where were you?
I'm
The
22.
car can do
Coming
it,
to church.
you know?
That's the only time we speed's coming to church. We don't speed going away, just coming here.
Was there other cars?
No, not
A
really.
few, but not much. And that thing was in the corner, man. It just handles. Oh, I love that car. Wish I had a car.
I was driving.
Yeah.
Wow, that's crazy.
Man, I totally lost where I was at.
Sit in the
Let's
camp.
see, sit in the camp, thank you. Woo! All right, that's on tape too, man, that is evil. So whether or not we agree with the law doesn't really matter, okay? It's the law. We obey. That was the point.
Aren't we supposed to obey the laws of the man? as well as obey the laws of God as well.
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
We are.
We're commanded.
Speed limits, right?
Yeah. The time, when do we disobey the law of man? Besides when we don't feel the speed limit's high enough?
When we have a constitution.
When the law of man is in direct opposition to the law of God, we have to make a choice. We would choose the law of the Lord. And the Lord says, the speed limit should not be 65 miles an hour. That's heresy. Dan's not coming back. I can see it now. I'll get back to the text. Sorry about that. All right, so, sin of the camp. The lot was taken, and it's determined, they go through the process and cast a lot between me and my son, Jonathan, and Jonathan is taken. And then I'll go ahead and read this last section and then,
That was where my question comes in.
go ahead, sir.
On verse 40,
I'm sorry.
and he said to all of Israel, you will be on one side, and I and my son Jonathan will be on the other side. What is that referring to? His troops against him, or the?
Yeah, I mean, that's all who's there, right? The whole nation's not there. That's like saying, you know, I went to the beach. Oh, yeah? Who was there? Oh, everybody was there.
But is he giving his troops an ultimatum at that point?
He's saying, it's, the way we're gonna divide this, for some reason, he feels it's leadership or the troops.
Okay.
So he's not saying half the troops go here, half the troops go there. He's just gonna say, it's either me and Jonathan, or it's somebody else.
Right.
Right? And so, on one side, whether physically they separated or not, possibly by a few feet, but the point of it is, you're right, that it's between him and all the troops from commanders down. Who did this? And it seems like he's kind of got an inkling that it was Jonathan. May not have been the first time that Jonathan has not obeyed his father's foolish commands, you know? Actually, we have another paragraph or so after this, but we're at the end of this particular narrative. So verse 43 through 46, again from the English Standard Version. Then Saul said to Jonathan, tell me what you have done. And Jonathan told him, I tasted a little honey with the tip of my staff that is in my hand. Here I am, I will die. And Saul said, God do so to me and more also. You will surely die, Jonathan. Then the people said to Saul, shall Jonathan die, who has worked this great salvation for Israel? Far from it. As the Lord lives, there shall not be one hair on his head fall to the ground, for he has worked with God this day. So the people ransomed Jonathan so that he did not die. Then Saul went up from pursuing the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. So with this paragraph, we have again a glaring contrast between Jonathan and Saul. Saul asks Jonathan, what have you done? Jonathan replies, I tasted a little honey with the tip of my staff that was in my hand. And then whether he is capitulating to it, I will die, or kind of saying it in a questioning tone, I'm going to die? Who knows? But he answers, and he says, I ate the honey. Let's go back to chapter 13, when Samuel confronts Saul. Verse 11, Samuel said, what have you done? See the similarity in the language? When I saw the people were scattering from me, 1, the people, and that you did not come within the days appointed, 2, it's your fault. And the Philistines had mustered at Michmash. 3, the Philistines are getting larger and larger. Saul cannot take responsibility for his own actions. He's making excuses. We call that ownership. At some point, you got to begin to take ownership. Jonathan, though much younger than Saul, clearly has this figured out. Even though He's being asked to account for something that was stupid. He owns it. Saul just being asked, what did you do? He can't own it. He's blaming it on everybody else but the person who actually did it. And then he continues on in verse 12. Now the Philistines will come down to me at Gilgal, and I have not yet, this is what happened. The Philistines were coming down, and I have not yet sought the favor of the Lord. So I forced myself. I got myself in a headlock with one arm, and my other arm, I had my arm behind my back, and I made myself do this. I didn't want to do it. But all you people, and your actions, forced me. Here's our second takeaway, and it's actually from last week, but combines with this week. So the first one was, Saul is found praying when he should be taking action, and taking action when he should be praying. Think about that for ourselves. The second one is, there comes a point in every person's life when they have to draw a line in the sand and say, from this point forward, I take ownership of my own actions. I no longer blame it on the way I was raised, the fact that I was a drug addict, that I have no education, that I went to prison, that I was the middle child, that I was an only child, that I was a foster child, right? We can find as many excuses as are out there, we can find them. And while they may be valid, as long as we rely on that, that's all it is an excuse. And we will not find victory in our life. But like Jonathan, if we're willing to say, this is what I did, consequences be damned, I'm the one who did that. Yeah, there were extenuating circumstances. Yeah, I have a family line of drinkers, so, the reason I turned out to be an alcoholic is because of them. But I'm the one that picked up the drink and took the drink. That's why I'm a drunk, because I drank. Not because my mother drank, or her mother, or her grandfather, or his grandfather, or whoever, but because I drank. And I know it might seem like this is a no-brainer, but this wisdom doesn't necessarily come with age. We have a family member who Carol and I both love dearly, who's still stuck in, when I was a child, my father hated me. Okay? His father didn't love him. And he's wounded. But he still finds that as an excuse for his behavior at times. Instead of saying, I remember when I drew that line in the sand. I'm not going to base my conduct on that. I'm going to take ownership for what I've done and free myself from the fact that my father hated me. If you're dealing with that, then I would adjure you to bring that before the Lord. And you may not recognize it today. You may recognize it in the future. As these things come up, remember, wait a minute, I'm making an excuse here. What's my part in this? God help me to be mature enough in you to take ownership. Because once I take ownership, I can control my actions. Can't control, it's because of my wife. Well, then I checked out, right? Because it's her fault. There's nothing can be done. But once it's my fault, once I've taken ownership, then I can do something about it and that situation can change. Right? Saul couldn't do that. He didn't have that ability for whatever reason.
Pride.
Yeah. So the people then rebel against the king. This is treason. And they say, Jonathan will surely not die because he worked with God today. And they're right. And the king backs down and his oath is forgiven. So the people at the end of verse 45 ransomed Jonathan so that he did not die. And the opportunity was lost. Look, verse 46. Then Saul went up from pursuing the Philistines, and the Philistines went to their own place. So the great victory never happened. It was a victory, and it helped, but it was not the victory that God had intended. And then we have just a little bit of summary, and we got 3 minutes. Let me just read this and we're out of here, and just a comment or two. When Saul had taken kingship over Israel, he fought against all his enemies on every side, against Moab, against the Ammonites, against Edom, against the kings of Zobah, against the Philistines. Wherever he turned, he routed them, and he did valiantly. And he struck the Amalekites and delivered Israel out of the hands of those who plundered them. So Saul has victory militarily. He doesn't have victory spiritually, but he is still God's anointed. And God is using him to bless his nation. And then a little bit here about Saul's family. Now the sons of Saul were Jonathan, Ishvi, Malchishua, and the names of his daughters were these. The firstborn was Merab, and the name of the younger was Michal. And Saul's wife was Ahinoam, the daughter of Ahimaaz. And the name of the commander of his army was Abner, the son of Ner, Saul's uncle. Kish was the father of Saul, and Ner the father of Abner, the son of Abiel. There was hard fighting against the Philistine all the days of Saul. And when Saul saw any strong man or any valiant man, he attached him to himself. So he continues to do what Samuel had warned the people. You're going to take your sons, he's going to take your daughters, and they're going to serve him. Do we have any questions?
How many Philistines do you think there were at that time?
I really don't know. I know that they had grown quite a bit. They were a coastal people, and they came from an area north of them, from the islands, up around Crete and that area in the northern Mediterranean. But I'm not sure the quantity of them. They were definitely resilient, though, because they fight, and we know that they had a number of major cities and kings or governors, within those cities. They were prosperous, and they didn't. Some of the things of the Canaanite people, some of the practices of the Canaanites, the Philistines took and made those their own. Like for the most part, the gods they worship were the Canaanite gods, but other things they didn't. The Jews were not the only circumcised. The Canaanites, most of the Canaanites were circumcised as well. But that's one of the reasons why when you read of the Philistines, and you don't read of the other, when they fight the other nations, they'll call them the uncircumcised Philistines, because they didn't take that practice on. Does anybody have any other questions?
So it's kind of like an orthodox on non-orthodox and whatever, kind of.
They took the practices of the people where they moved to. Yeah. So, Carol, we're done. Did you kill us that?